Okay, so many of you may have noticed the recent trend of using larger and larger cymbals. People are using crashes as hi-hats, people are using rides as crashes. It's crazy out there, and I am certainly no exception. I've been using a pair of 16-inch crashes as hi-hats now for the past couple of years and really been enjoying them. So I thought today we could take a look specifically at hi-hats and using larger hi-hats like 15s, 16s, and even 17s, and just talk about whether this is just a fad or whether there is a benefit or what benefits you might get out of using larger hi-hats. Now, two of my favorite drummers consistently use 17-inch crashes as hi-hats. That's Steve Jordan and Ronnie Vannucci from The Killers. And one thing that they both say is a benefit for them using larger hi-hats is in a recording situation. And what they'll talk about is how bright and present in a mix 14-inch hi-hats, which are, obviously kind of our accepted standard, but how bright and present those will be in a mix and how much they'll poke out despite, playing properly and using appropriate dynamics. That 14-inch hi-hats just tend to occupy a frequency range that our ears are very attuned to and can really poke out in a mix. Whereas when you use like 15, 16, or 17-inch hi-hats, the pitch, of course, naturally drops and it just tends to fit in better in a mixing situation with the rest of the kit and the rest of the band. Now, I've definitely found that to be the case, but for me, there are two additional benefits to using larger hats. One is a much smoother slosh sound. I tend to find that smaller hi-hats, like 14s and 13s, feel and tend to sound a little clangier when you are using them more open and you're just kind of sloshing on the hats. Where 15s, 16s, and 17s tend to just have a nicer spread and just kind of sound smoother. The other benefit that I find is more of a feel than an actual sound, and it's hard to describe, but to me it almost feels like you're playing through the hats, if that makes any sense. I think some people in the industry would describe this as buttery, but I'll refrain from using that term and I'll say it just kind of feels like almost like you're playing through the hats. So I've actually got a bunch of hi-hats here today that we can check out. So what I'll do is I'll just go over each pair individually and just describe them real quick, and then I'll let you hear them in the context of a mix. I'll use a track that I've recorded with one of my groups, and I'll just flip between the different hi-hat types and sizes, and you can decide for yourself which one works best in this context, and is there any truth to larger hi-hats sitting better in a mix. So I'll let you see that, decide for yourself, but first let's check out the hi-hats. So first up for 14s, I've got the Meinl sand hats. These have a really thick bottom hat and a thin top hat, and they are sandblasted, so this is going to be kind of like our standard size 14. For 15s, I've got a nice pair of old Zildjian A's. These are vintage, probably late 50s, early 60s A's, and they're fairly thin, and the way these ones actually work is the heavier cymbal goes on top, and it's even marked as the top cymbal. Usually you'd put the lighter cymbal on top, but I found that they actually sound best when you put the slightly heavier one on top of these. Next, I've got a pair of 16s that I'm going to be using. This is a Meinl 16-inch medium thin crash, and then this, I just brought this back from Juneau. I forgot I even had this cymbal. This is a 16-inch, very thin sand crash prototype. This is a Meinl that Mike Johnston actually gave to me at one of his camps, and it's super, super thin, and it just makes for a really, really smooth sounding hi-hat top. You'll hear that. And then lastly, I've got a pair of 18-inch crashes. I think we'll use the dual crash and the extra dry thin crash. We'll put those together to make hi-hats. Now, before we jump into it, I tend to find that for me, 16-inch hi-hats are kind of the largest that still make sense as hi-hats for me. They start to sound really, really chunky and low once you get to 17s and 18s, even though that's what Steve Jordan and Ronnie and a lot of my favorite drummers use. For me, 15s are incredibly versatile. 16s are a bit more of a specific sound, but they're still totally usable in almost all scenarios for me. And then 17s and 18s get to be kind of much. And then 13s, again, are kind of on the other end of the spectrum. And then 14s, of course, are kind of our commonly accepted standard. So just my thoughts on the matter before we jump in. Let's check out what these actually sound like, and then you can let me know what you think. So let me know in the comments which hi-hats you think worked best in that track. For me, there's not necessarily a better or worse overall, maybe just better or worse to your ears or for a particular situation. Hopefully this was of some use to you and somewhat interesting. If you liked it, let me know. Feel free to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.